Hello. I can't hear you. You're muted. Joy.
There's the button. Good
There it
afternoon.
is.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well.
Hey, good afternoon, Don. Hey,
Hi,
Matt.
how are you?
Hey, Weiss.
Wonderful. By yourself.
I'm good.
Are you guys on spring break this week?
The schools are. Not
Yeah.
this week. They have Friday off and then they have next week off.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
think Collier County's on this week. Charlotte County.
Yes, Collier's on spring break this week. Manatee is where I'm at. We're on spring break this week. So
Usually we're the same week, but for some reason it didn't work out this year. So
yeah.
for those that get it, they're on spring break. I don't get it. So
Yeah. Me neither.
yeah.
Copies audits. So I think Kathy had requested Michael to send a copy of the audits. I'll send it to you. The audit they did went to the board. It should go to the audit committee first for review. They make the recommendation, then it goes to the board. Not our fault. We never got it.
Right.
So she wants me to pick a process document.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Gerard. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm probably going to need to leave this meeting about 5, just after 5. I have an appointment that I gotta get to at 5:30.
Okay. Okay, we're just waiting for Paul. His computer decided it didn't want to play nice right now, so he's rebooting to come back in. So, Miss Martha, may I ask, are you with RSM or are you public? I just need to, for my minutes.
I'm with RSM. Thank you for
Thank
asking.
you. Hello. Okay, we're still waiting for Paul. Of course, Comcast is doing work right outside his house, so he's going to try to call in and see where we get from there.
Hello,
Hello, Paul.
how are you, Dawn?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I apologize to everyone for whatever reason they have decided today is a great day to do work on the cable lines along the Winkler extension, which is where I am located. As I can't see everybody on Zoom, Dawn, can you do me the favor and determining who is in attendance and whether we have quorum at this point?
At this point, I can tell you Andrew cannot join us. He emailed me about a half hour ago and said he has a conflicting appointment. So we have, let's see, Jeff and Butch and James and Kara and Gerard and you. So we have 6.
Okay, so we do have quorum.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, recognizing that we do have quorum, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 4:37 p.m. Are there members of the public in attendance at the meeting?
No, Miss Martha is with RSM, and we also have Matt and William from RSM.
Okay, wonderful. Hearing no members of the public being in attendance at the meeting, I'm hoping that everybody has had the opportunity to review the minutes from our January 20th meeting. If so, I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So move.
Okay, and can I get a second, please?
Second.
Okay, hearing a second on that motion, is there any discussion related to the minutes? Hearing none, I'm going to close discussion. All in favor of the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, let the minutes record that the minutes of the January 20th, 2022 meeting were approved by all committee members in attendance today. I do not believe Ms. Gittens is on the call at present. I know she had a conflict. I know she will do her very best to be joining us.
She
I'm
waited to
doing-
join.
I'm here.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm Zoom surfing today, so.
I wish I was having the same success. Unfortunately, the internet is not my friend today. Would you please provide us with any updates from the board?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Like I said, I'm Zoom surfing. I just got off of finance and came over here. Welcome to our guests. I'm Jennifer, and I think Matt is on here somewhere. I just wanted to cover a couple of things and then give you guys a few minutes to ask me any questions, and it may help some of the questions that they asked. Basically, the superintendent is all in line to be here. He will be on for 1 month from April to May, I believe, as a consultant at a flat rate. And if you want to see the details of that contract or the official contract for him as superintendent, it's on board docs at this time. I have spoken with him a couple of times, and he is anxious to go ahead and get started. And I will say, and I'm telling people all over, to make sure we welcome him with welcoming arms, because it is very difficult to get a superintendent right now, and especially in our district because of the pending political issue of an elected superintendent. And there are people that we've even tried to hire that did not want to come, because when you think of over a certain level of expertise, to uproot themselves and to go to an area for what may be as little as 2 years is very difficult to attract someone. So I just thank him every chance I get for doing that and coming here to be with us. Regarding that, I was asked this in the last meeting regarding the elected official piece. And I've said this before, and I always give the caveat in any meetings that anything I say to you, I've already said on the dais or will be saying on the dais. So it's just a follow through. I feel that this whole issue is a referendum against the board and against certain things and district things that have happened. But at this point in time, it has passed both houses, and it was just waiting for the governor to sign off on it. And I'm sure that's going to happen. So it looks as though in November of this year, it will be on the ballot. And in our discussion and finance meeting, my caveat to it all is we have to be very, very careful and aware that the only requirements to run for office are that you are, of age, an American citizen, and a registered voter. So we could end up in a very difficult situation with a superintendent that is someone that is popular and has the money to run, but is not necessarily what's best for children. So that's just a fact that's out there. And the board has put out a statement from the board as to why basically we think that it's not the greatest idea. And it is out, it was sent to Tallahassee, and I believe it's on board docs or somewhere after it was on board docs because it was a part of an agenda item. And you can look at what our rationale is and why it's going to be tricky. Are there districts that do it? Yes, there are, but it's very, very tricky. How political are we going to make education? So anyway, someone asked in the other meeting too about proximity. And at this point, I spoke with the superintendent the last week, and I asked about proximity. And there's some people out there that are saying, oh yeah, we're going to do it in the fall. You don't just do proximity in 3 months. It's impossible to do that with all the things that go along with it. Davis Demographics is the company that was helping us to get that started and hopefully across the finish line. And at this time, their contract will be up soon. They have been helping us with a lot of the GIS and data information after Dominic Giminelli left. So they have been tremendously helpful in filling in with all of the data and things. And I understand, I believe at the next meeting, which will be on the 29th, because next week is spring break, we will, and I know all of our teachers are like, please hurry. But on the 29th at that meeting, I believe Davis Demographics is going to come on and give us an update and some of the updated information. I found a lot of their information, like scatter charts and things like that, as to where kids are and demographics and all that, to be very, very helpful. So I'm hoping at that meeting on the 29th, they give us an update of what that looks like. And that should be very, very interesting. Someone asked about the transportation, about an audit in transportation, and the fact that it had been stated that there hadn't been one for, I think, 10 years or something. So I told them I would bring it up with you guys to kind of add to your parking lot, that transportation audit. But I think, and that's really going to be a little bit tough, but I think if we're going to do proximity, we need to have a transportation audit. It kind of, to me, goes hand in hand. And I am not the expert in any way, shape, or form, but you can tell me whether that's true. I think if we're looking at saving money because of transportation, we need to know now, what is transportation doing? So an audit, I told them I would bring it up to you guys, and Paul, if you want to add it to the list. And I told them that you guys, along with RSM, are prioritizing how those audits will occur. Someone mentioned about impact fees that will be at 100% on March 10th of 23. And the rates that we've been getting now have been increasing 2.5 every, yearly, every 4 years. So that I am going to bring forward to the board and say, what are we doing? Is someone going to speak to the county commissioners? I suggested we don't say anything and hope they forget. And I know that's not going to work. So that's just my funny way of saying it. But we have to look at what's in it for us and what's in it for them, and how we can make this work. The last thing they had asked questions about, of course, was the 7 periods and the 4 periods. And my basic answer, like I said, is what I said on the dais. The academic services had spoken to, at least to me and a couple of the board members individually the week before it came out. My suggestion, because the question in finance was that some students were very upset. I said that goes back to my question about what type of process documents do we have for communicating information? And I am really going to try to hope to champion that. We cause ourselves a lot of issues, not of the what, but the how we put things out. And deciding who are the stakeholders and who needs to know first, who needs to know second. And the thing is, if you don't tell this one and this one finds out, the other one make it up in between. And we can't have people making up what they think we're trying to say. As far as the students are concerned, if you go back to our last briefing last Tuesday, academic services did show us the process that they're doing for students. I had suggested something like a cartoon. They took 2 students talking to each other about what it meant. And one was, this, and one was the 4, and one was the 7. And they just kind of discussed it. And I hope that going forward, we can communicate things in a simplistic manner, not just for students, but for everybody. I mean, why do something at college level when you can do it at the average reading level in the United States is 6th grade? So let's just make it simple in the beginning and then build on it for those that want further information. So that's kind of what I have. What other, one last thing. It had come up about 2 board members being at an advisory board meeting. And we discussed this on the dais last week because, and the reason I brought it up is because several times people would say, I can't say this because there are 2 board members in attendance. And the technicality and the legal part of that is we can be in the same room because it is a posted and I'm not using the right word, but it's been posted and acknowledged and everything to the community that we're having a meeting. Noted meeting, thank you. However, only the liaison person should be participating. The other person is there just as an observer. So we're covered in that it's a noted meeting, but that's the other caveat. So if we see, others in attendance, that's fine. They have the right to do so. And that's all I have. Is there anyone else that has any quick questions for me?
One thing I did want to bring to everyone's attention, Ms. Gittens and I did discuss, as relates to an additional board member being in attendance and members of the public. The last meeting we all met in person, we saw that members of the public were joining us around the table. I believe that we should segregate the members of the public from the table so that they are not deemed to be open to continual communication. They're allowed their 3 minutes as per our procedures to speak, and they can record the meeting. That is their prerogative because it is a publicly noticed meeting, but they should not be part of the table. So what we have to determine, and Dawn, if you can, or Dave, from a logistical standpoint, if we can identify a location for when we do meet in person where those individuals can sit, it would be greatly appreciated. Obviously, our next meeting is not going to be for several weeks at least, so we do have the time to come up with that proper location.
Hey, Paul, this is Dave Newland. We can, we'll take care of that logistically. If we meet in person, we'll make sure we have the public sit in an area away from our committee table in the same room.
Okay. And RSM, I welcome your thoughts as relates to this. In my mind, Ms. Gittens is our board liaison. We should be taking board directive from Ms. Gittens. And if another board member opts to be at that meeting, they should not be giving us, whether it be contrary or agreed upon direction. It should come through Ms. Gittens because she is the one who the board has determined is our liaison. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's what we've seen regularly. In fact, if there are additional board members, they are typically treated as the public and they have their 3 minutes just like anybody else. And they are usually not seated at the table, to your point earlier.
Okay.
But we welcome them to come. It's great that they're interested in the topic, but you're right. That's what we typically say. Separate. If they would like to speak, they get their 3 minutes, just like any other public member.
How does the rest of the audit committee feel about that? Because if agreed, I would entertain a motion that we create that process where board members are beyond Ms. Gittens or the board liaison are assigned a location other than at the table with the audit committee members and are allotted the same time slot as any other member of the public.
I agree. That makes a lot of sense. They're board members, but they're also members of the public. So if they're not acting in the context of a board member, then they can act as in the context of some member of the public.
As committee chair, I am not in a position where I should be making motions. Mr. Carrington, could I credit you with that motion?
Definitely, absolutely.
Okay, hearing a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Let the minutes reflect that it was unanimously approved by all members present. The next item of business will relate to the audit plan and also a discussion with the individuals from RSM as to the best way to perform effective and efficient audits, audit risk assessment, creation of the audit plan, etc. And where we, as the audit committee, members of staff and administration who are present here, can best assist you in that performance. And obviously, Ms. Gittens being here as our board liaison to assure that the board is also on that same page with us. We don't want a repeat of the past is what we're trying to get to.
And let me just say that, first of all, thank you to Paul and who was it that came with you? Was it David that presented?
Mr. Davis, Jeffrey Davis.
Mr. Davis. I knew David was in there somewhere. Thank you so much. And I want the rest of you to know if you didn't watch the meeting, they were wonderful and they answered all the questions. The board felt very comfortable in the hands of the audit committee and their decision making and qualifications to do so. And yes, the board, I believe, unanimously agreed to move ahead with the caveats as stated. And I believe it's going to be a much smoother road for everyone and successful. So, and thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
Okay. From RSM standpoint, would it be you, Ms. Bertha, or would it be Mr. Blondell who would be leading the charge as to RSM's approach that they wish to take with the audit plan, risk assessment, and audits?
Definitely Matthew Blondell, but we come as a team and you guys will notice Clara Ewing, who you're used to seeing here, is on a plane to Paris. So we did not ask her to join us today. She's pushed this trip for like a year and a half and she's finally on the plane, but you will be seeing a lot of Matt Blondell as well as Weiss Campbell, who's on here today with the Zoom.
Wonderful. And we expect Clara to bring croissants and what other for our next meeting.
And may I say, Jennifer, you did not have to sound so gleeful when you said, oh no, it would be Matthew Blunt.
I have to say, I'm just delighted that this audit committee has been set up You guys are so professional. And Gwen, you know, we've had many, many conversations. We do this throughout the state and really throughout the country. And we know how to run an audit and our procedures and our processes. And we are very excited about the new superintendent. And I echo your response in that how challenging it is to have that when all the other things are going on. But, you know, the audit committee is set, the process is working, and you all went in front of the board. And so we're really delighted to be back.
Just for the committee's full clarity, I spoke with Dawn prior to the meeting today. And one request that I made of her is, once we solidify a process that all parties can agree to, we document it in writing. That will now be our report card for a going forward basis, so we can see where we stand in the status of everything. And Dave, I don't know if Dawn made you aware. I pressed and probably overstepped my bounds, and I'm acknowledging it. But asked Dawn if she could get that document turned around within 24, at most 48 hours. So this way, everybody starts on the right foot.
Okay, I'll talk to her about it.
And
Thank
Dawn
you.
was very amenable to it, but I just want to make sure you were part of that loop.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Paul.
And Jennifer and Matt, from a staffing perspective, Dave Newland will be your point of contact. He will ensure that you get who you need, what you need, and when you need from administration. So he is your key individual. And obviously you have access to whoever the superintendent deems appropriate. But from our audit committee standpoint, Mr. Newland is your point of contact from an administrative standpoint. From an audit committee standpoint, obviously as committee chair, you have full access to me, but you also, whatever other member of the committee you need to have access to, by all means you do. And from a board standpoint, you have Ms. Gittens. Jim, I see your hand is up.
All right, yeah, I didn't mean to derail an excellent conversation, but I do need to leave at 5. It's my son's birthday today, and he's requesting a Chipotle dinner.
Oh,
So I
happy
apologize.
birthday.
Thank you. He's 8, but if there's any follow-ups or anything like that, again, I do apologize, but just let me know, please.
Jim, I'm going to ask a favor of you before you hang up, and very happy birthday to your son.
Thank you.
Anything that you wish to add into it, because obviously we're recording this meeting. If you get the opportunity over the next 24 or so hours to listen, and you say, oh, I wish they had considered this, by all means, send it through Dawn or Dave out to the members of the committee, and we can actually take that under advisement.
I absolutely will. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you.
All right, talk to you soon.
Okay, I'm going to leave this in the very capable hands of Matt and Jennifer, if Matt has any sticking points on it where he feels that he needs the support from Jennifer.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I'll echo Jennifer's sentiments. We're certainly thrilled to be back. We received the board signed statement of work and master services agreement this week and returned those countersigned. So I think we're officially under contract now. With the statement of work, as we had previously discussed, the timeline for the audits for the information technology security and cyber assessment, the start date was March 2022. So we'll be reaching out through Mr. Newland to schedule some kickoff meetings with the IT folks at the district to start that audit. And then pretty shortly thereafter, we'll also be reaching out to schedule some kickoff meetings and individual meetings really with for the risk assessment process. And so as part of that process, we will be requesting meetings with each of the audit committee members along with each of the board members just to get one-on-ones with each of you to kind of just establish that connection point and understand your perspectives, of course, as we move through that process. And then, of course, we'll be putting that document together and then sharing that at a committee meeting at a later date. And then we'll also be kind of concurrently with starting that. We'll be reaching out through Mr. Newland again to the responsible parties on the prior issued reports to conduct some follow-up activities. So, basically in the prior reports, either a department or sometimes a specific individual was noted as a responsible party in management's action plan. So we'll be reaching out to those folks to discuss where they are in the process of kind of completing the action plan that they noted, or of course, if anything's changed, obtaining an update and pivoting if we need to on testing strategy or anything like that. But to conduct that follow-up work, of course, we'll be reaching out to those folks individually. And then,
Matt, if you don't mind, if I interrupt you one moment,
yes,
just
sir.
for your own records, from an IT standpoint, with all due respect to all the other members of the committee, I would like Mr. Davis to be your initial audit committee point of contact, followed by myself, and then Vice Chair, Mr. Swank. And then you can go alphabetically thereafter with the other committee members. But I do feel that Mr. Davis has the most expertise on this committee as relates to information technology.
Absolutely. Yes, I know during the meeting that you both attended, the board meeting, we watched that meeting live and saw that and certainly picked up on the expertise there. So we'll definitely connect with you all for that.
And may I just ask, Paul, do you need to just make sure that's approved by everyone is everyone in agreement on that order?
Well, ultimately, that's going to come down to RSM and who they can get a hold of in order to most efficiently perform that work. And obviously, if Mr. Davis is not available first, they would just contact each of the remaining audit committee members based on their availability. So I would hate for them to commence the process a day later because they're waiting for Mr. Davis's schedule to clear in order to go to the next person in line. That's just my recommendation. If anybody disagrees, I think we can all agree that Mr. Davis does bring probably the most internal audit experience as it relates to information technology among the 7 audit committee members. Each one of us has our own area of expertise, and that's why I think it's beneficial that members of RSM speak with each member of the audit committee because it will gain different perspectives and different knowledge bases from each of the individuals on this committee, which is what makes this committee so strong.
And something that we'll have to take into consideration as it relates to the information technology and cybersecurity assessment, that will not be presented in the sunshine. We'll have to work through the attorney so that we can have a closed session meeting with this group and, if determined, interest with the board in a joint meeting. We've done that in the past. So what we don't want to do is have a sunshine meeting giving all the keys to the castle. And that's something that's okay to do with sunshine because it has to do with security and networks, etc. So for that meeting, when we deliver that, we will want to coordinate with the attorney so that we make sure that we do that appropriately.
Yeah, and Jennifer, that was expressly brought up by the board when Mr. Cohen and I had presented the RSM SOW to them. There was explicit request by one of the board members that RSM and the audit committee go through, redact any potential sensitive information from the report if it's going to be published as a document. So we'll have to come through and go through that, see what can be presented, what cannot be presented, but they asked specifically that we safeguard that data. So that was a specific request.
So typically what we do is we issue a letter in the public to basically let the public know that this has been completed. And then our report is 100% issued confidentially. It's usually, unless otherwise objected to, presented directly to the superintendent as kind of the owner of the keys to the castle. And then it is shared in a closed session meeting or one-on-one individually with each one of board members, what have you. But it is very beneficial to have a closed meeting with the committee, with members of district IT staff there so that there can be good conversation. And obviously it would not necessarily be Matthew and I, but we would have our RSM experts there to answer any questions.
Sure. Now, one of the questions that I also had as Mr. Blundell was speaking is in terms of starting to kick off meetings for the risk assessment. Do we know roughly what's the time frame of the risk assessment? If you were to put 6 to 8 weeks or whatnot, because that is the precursor to the audit plan. And if we're talking the cyber risk, the follow-up activities, I just don't want to get out in front where we're then going to hit a lull while we're waiting for the risk assessment and the audit plan to be finished before we could start planning the rest of the year.
So we would be essentially hoping to start the risk assessment conversations. You know, we'll probably reach out next week to begin scheduling the risk assessment conversation. So, I mean, we want to get started as soon as we can with that. So, you know, it'll start basically probably that last week of March. Perhaps we might have some meetings next week, but probably not just due to scheduling, I guess.
Spring break.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Spring break and those sorts of things. So no, we'll reach out to begin scheduling those conversations as quickly as we can. And we'll reach out next week for sure.
And typically, how long do you think it would take to execute or to complete that? Typically.
So I think, yeah, like, yeah, 8 weeks is probably not uncommon. It just really depends on the availability of everybody. Sure. Sometimes it can be difficult because we're meeting with, you know, members of the board, audit committee, and senior leadership at the district. Sometimes it just takes a long time to get those meetings scheduled, and then, you know, then we have to kind of come together internally and aggregate all that data that we've collected and information that we've gotten from those meetings.
Well, as a member of the committee, and if unless some other members of the committee have a concern, as we go through these audit committee meetings monthly, and the next one we have, if you could just give us an update on how that's trailing, if you're running into difficulties getting anyone scheduled, so that way we could kind of escalate that to the board and make sure that we have availability, because we want to make sure that we're tracking. So as we do updates, I imagine you'll give us an update of how those meetings are coming. Yes.
Absolutely.
Sure. Cool. Thank you. That's all I had.
And it would also be really nice to get the involvement and opinions of the new superintendent to, you know, kind of be able to have a kickoff meeting and incorporate thoughts, concepts to be able to bring that to you all.
So let me ask, because I'm wondering if I should do that or at least mention it. That would be with the audit committee and the superintendent and the board, or just the audit committee and superintendent and RSM?
Well, we would want to have a meeting with him to understand and get his impact, his thoughts on the risk assessment.
Right. But I'm just saying, who would you want involved with that meeting? Would that be this committee and you guys?
One-on-one with the superintendent.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want to, Dawn, can you do that, or do you want me to ask one of the secretaries to do that? I
think you have
can't
Mr.
ask-
Newland coordinate that instead of Dawn. Mr. Newland
Okay.
is the point person for that.
Mr. Newland, do you want to do that, or do you want me to get our secretaries to do it? I don't know if he's there. I'll just go ahead and say I'll ask our secretaries to set up a one-on-one with RSM and the new superintendent. Like I said, he will be on in a consulting basis, and I'll have to check and see if we can do that if that's within the purview of that contract, and we can get it done sooner than later.
Great.
Okay, so I'll make sure we get it done.
Okay. One other group I would like to see part of that interview process are the committee chairs of the other advisory committees.
I'm sure that that's a part of his onboarding.
I'm referring to RSM, Ms. Gittens.
Oh, I'm sorry.
During their interview process, to meet with the committee chairs at the very least of the various advisory committees, because I think they bring considerable value. I'm going back, Jennifer, to a comment you made about the presentation of the information technology audit. I think in lieu of the fact that it will not be under sunshine because it will be a closed meeting, I don't believe we should allow a second board member to be there, because then it could be perceived that board members are receiving preferential treatment under sunshine than any other member of the community. So I think
It's
for that,
either all,
gotta be
right, it's all of them come or just the liaison. But yes, during that closed session meeting, there's no public and there's only members of the committee and those deemed necessary to join in on the conversation to present the report.
And we'll await attorney opinion as to
Mhm.
which is the best approach, whether it be full board or Ms. Gittens as a board liaison, who could then have that discussion with the board members under closed session during a board meeting. With RSM, obviously. Okay, Matt, if you want to continue, please.
So, okay, so after the kickoff meetings, of course, we'll be working through field work and providing updates. I believe we have a bi-monthly update that we'll be providing. So we will need to coordinate, I guess, with Ms. Gittens. The way that it's written is basically that we'll coordinate through a board appointee to kind of communicate our updates through. Perhaps that's Mr. Newland. And then from there, it would kind of go out so that everybody on the audit committee and the board is on the distribution list appropriately. But I know that the way that it was sort of structured was that we would just send it to one person, and then that one person would then forward it on to all the other appropriate individuals. So we'll be sending those, of course, beginning now. We'll start sending the updates, and so you guys, to Mr. Davis's earlier question, you'll see regular updates from us as to the progress of each of the projects. And of course, if there is anything that is hindering us from proceeding forward, of course, that'll be noted on there. Obviously, we hope to, not have to raise anything to you all's level. Hopefully it'll just continue to move. And we'll work hard to make sure that it's kind of moving without, needing to involve you guys to push things along. But
And
we'll work.
Matthew, I'm going to assume that when we were working with you all before, and the board wanted the regular updates, not the the redacted type information, but to come. I'm sure they're going to say have it come to the board as you did previously, rather than having, if that would be okay. You remember when you would send it out, whatever, once bi-weekly or weekly, and it went to all the board members at the same time?
Yeah, so I think, because of the new committee, I'm happy to do that. We can just kind of create one list that goes to the board, and then we can also copy that, whoever the designee is. Another way that we had intended to do it was that we just sent it to one designee, and then that person was the one to forward it to the appropriate parties.
And that's how I would like to have it. I would like to have Mr. Newland be your point person, that report go to him. As chair of audit committee, if I can be copied on it, so I can ensure that it gets into Dawn's hands so that it can be disseminated to the audit committee members. What I would like to see is us, until we are fully on board with these three, I'll call them audits, even though they're not officially audits. I would like this committee to meet on a monthly basis, so that we will have a status update at our meeting in April to see exactly where our RSM stands. Another meeting in May, another meeting in June, at which time I would hope that we are in a good place and are ready for some discussion on the results of the work being done by RSM.
So, Paul, can I ask, would it be okay then for RSM to send it to the board, which I'm sure they're going to say they should be, copied on it, and then just the CC would be to you as the chair of the audit committee, and you distribute it to the committee?
I have a concern about that, because now a document is being presented to the board that doesn't know what was discussed at the audit committee level. The board is now going to discuss it amongst themselves without a knowledge base. and is going to form their own opinions. I would much rather come through audit committee, and that would be through.
And then to the board.
And then the board.
I see what you're saying. So
Which
then why
Frank and
not?
I would be in a position to appear before the board as chair and vice chair to discuss the progress that RSM is making.
So in that case, why not just me as the liaison and you as the chair, and then when at the time that it's ready with you guys, I would distribute it to the board, you distribute it to the committee.
Absolutely, I'm very comfortable with that, but I do feel that it should come through this committee first. That we are on the same page with RSM. So should the board have any questions, this committee will be prepared to answer, as will RSM, rather than the committee with no prior information, receiving a report and not really understanding what that report really means in detail.
Right, okay.
So, sir, are we still sending our report to Mr. Newland? And then
Yes, sure.
from, okay.
Absolutely, because Dawn reports to Mr. Newland. So through Mr. Newland, he will forward the report to Dawn, who will disseminate it to the audit committee members.
Jennifer, if you need my information, let me know. I can forward you my contact information so those reports can be sent to me.
Okay.
Jennifer, I'm trying not to muddy down the process. So
Yes.
you now have your point of contact with Mr.
Yes,
Newland.
sir. Yes, and in many of our clients, we have that liaison, and then it is dispatched. Anything that we send is dispatched simultaneously to the board members and the audit committee. It is then sunshine. Once I send it to Mr. Newland, it is part of public record request. It's eligible. So it does get a little, could get a little interesting if, say, Gwen has something that the rest of the board doesn't have, or the chair has something that the rest of the audit committee members don't have, and their board member goes to them and asks them something. So we may get to a point where, you know, once we send it to Mr. Newland, which is fantastic for us, we have one person to send it to, that it gets distributed simultaneously to both all members of the audit committee and all members of the board.
Which I am very fine with. I'm trying to make it as easy for RSM as possible, having that one key point person, rather than if there are changes within audit committee members or changes in the board where, great, I sent it to a prior board member because I didn't get a chance to update my
Correct.
distribution list. That would fall on Mr. Newland to have that.
And in the definition of this, for Dawn's purposes, perhaps the title, you know, let's say Mr. Newland isn't here, that we would say to his position on the audit committee, as opposed to, you know, which is at this time Dave Newland. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because your point, okay. So his position is staff liaison to the audit committee, correct? Am I right, Dave?
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, you can have it as well that I can have myself, if not here, my designee.
Right.
do it that
And
way as
I'm
well.
saying put it as the title, as, you know, RSM sends the information directly to the staff liaison of the audit committee, dash right now, Dave Newland. And that
Right.
dash afterwards can change at any time, but at least it sets the precedent if it does change.
Yeah, okay, yes.
And Dawn, if you could please document that, that will be something that should be part of the agreed upon procedure we're going to have with RSM on a going forward basis.
Well,
So, and so to make sure, Paul, so then when it goes to Dave, he disseminates it to the committee
And
then,
board.
and the board. Because I thought you were saying that you guys wanted to look and make sure there was nothing that you didn't want to clarify before it got to the board.
No, what I want to make sure of is that it didn't just go to the board and the committee knew nothing about it. That's what my concern is. You know.
Okay.
We all need to be on the same page. And obviously, if a audit committee member has a question for RSM, they should feel free to be able to speak to RSM to get clarity. And we
And
can
if there's
establish a
something
protocol
that,
for that.
and if there's something that should be closed session, then RSMU will, instead of just sending it as a regular report, Matt, you will say the pending report or whatever needs to be done by closed session.
Correct. Nothing in the dashboards would be any, we would never put anything in the dashboard that would be, something that we wouldn't want to be public.
Okay.
And so, of course, when we get to the final report, of course, we'll work through the attorney to schedule a closed session.
Okay, and I'm seeing on the call, I see Kathy's iPhone. Can I assume that that is our board attorney?
Yes, it's
Yes.
me. Good morning, good afternoon.
Okay,
And let me just say too, then, make sure that our attorney is on that list to receive it as well, right?
Mr. Newland?
Just for clarification, I just want to, I know we mentioned about the report. Obviously, I'm the contact to be sent to me from RSM. I would then in turn share with the audit committee. I know is also said with the board. As far as that goes, the audit committee need to, would you still be advising the board regarding the report's findings? Even though you're saying the report goes to them at the same time?
The report will go at the same time. We would be available at the board's request to be available for a board meeting to discuss that report from our audit committee perspective.
Okay.
But it wouldn't make sense for the board to see it and we haven't seen it yet as an audit committee.
Well, I agree. I know they definitely go to the audit committee first, but it sounds like you would want to go the same. You're saying the same time as the audit committee. You want the report going to the board as well, correct?
I'm going to leave that to our board attorney, whether or not
Okay.
you feel that's an appropriate process. Matt, could you explain it a little bit clearer? I don't know if our attorney was on the call for the entire discussion that we just had related to that report, because they do that. It's very important that we get her insight.
Sure. So we would send on the second Friday of each month, we will send an update to Mr. Newland that will just be a high level update of where we are in each of the projects. And then that will then be disseminated by Mr. Newland to the audit committee and the board. And then of course, we can answer any questions that come up from that. When it comes to the final reports that would accompany or be related to each of the projects, the final deliverable that we'll give for each of the projects, we will have exit meetings with the district staff to finalize the report. And if indeed they're needed, management responses or management action plans to finalize that report. And then the typical process would be that we would schedule a meeting, with the audit committee meeting where we would distribute the report to the audit committee. It would be given, I'm assuming through Mr. Newland, to be posted a week in advance for you guys to review it. And then we would have a meeting, we would present the report to the audit committee and answer, of course, any questions during that audit committee meeting. And then essentially, once we transmit that report, the final report to Mr. Newland to be posted, that's when it's a final report and it's posted and it's publicly available. But up until that time, it would remain in draft.
And you also, also need to make sure that the attorney is on that list to receive it when Mr. Newland sends it out. It should be the committee, the board, and the attorney.
I would say the superintendent too, if we can.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a
Non-voting
quick
members.
question. I have a quick question. So the report regarding the cybersecurity audit.
That's a different process, Kathy.
Okay, I just
That's-
wanted to make sure because that one
yes.
can't go out like that. Okay, very good.
Right.
That sounds fine to me. And then the other question I had is these Friday updates. I'm assuming that the cybersecurity will be on there too. Is there anything that's going to be present some type of vulnerability?
No.
Okay, all right.
There
Just
will
wanted to
not.
make sure. All right, thank you.
Okay, and
All right, this is Butch Swank. I've been uncharacteristically quiet, and I apologize. I just switched from my office to mobile. But I had a quick question, which is I heard like action items or something like that, which is something that I always like. So I just wanted to this will be my first time formally dealing with RSM audits. I've been doing for a long time, but one thing that I clearly like is delineated action items. Like, this is where we see issues. This is what we want to see done. So there's kind of no ambiguity. So I guess my question is, how do you guys present that? Like, does it evolve, or, you know, are you using like, here are best practices other districts have utilized? I'm just kind of curious from an audit committee perspective, how we ensure, you know, recommendations are actually being observed and then, you know, successfully implemented. And then, you know, down the road, we're also basically making sure they're continuing to be utilized. So just curious what that looks like from.
Yeah, so
like,
great,
what we
great
can
question.
expect.
Great question, great conversation. So, and again, let's put the IT stuff aside, right? We all know that that is going to be handled very differently outside of the sunshine. So a typical report, which we've issued in the past, includes an overview of the observation or the issue or the finding. It also includes our recommended action. And together with that is management's response, which includes estimated completion dates and a responsible party. So we go through that process together collaboratively. You might come to the table and say, we've identified this issue, this internal control that's not there. We will collaborate with the process owner to say, how can we mitigate this control? We have some ideas. We might get IT involved, right? If it's payroll, we might get human resources involved. So depending on what that issue looks like, depends on the parties that kind of brainstorm, what's the best way to mitigate this risk? Hey, this is what we've seen at school district A, but you have a different system, right? This is what we've seen at school district B. And there's a lot of conversation that goes around that. So identifying the issue is the first part. Coming up with our recommended action is part of that, but really management's response, how it's developed and how they're going to mitigate the risk identified is a very collaborative process. And that management's response and action plan is included with the issue. And again, an estimated completion date, which, you know, depending on the challenges of mitigating that risk, could be done, right? We've done it, it's handled, we're doing it right now. It could be 3 months, it could be a year if it has something to do with a technology change or what have you. So as noted in the SOW, once we issue that report, it's typical to come back in 6 months, 9 months, a year to say, okay, remember this issue that we talked about? This is what we said we were going to do. And by we, I mean you guys, right? The district. And then we come in and we take a look. Did you do this? Did this procedure get written? Did it get implemented? Let's take a look. Let's pull a sample. Can we close this item, or does it remain open for further time period and additional testing? So once that issue is closed, through the risk assessment process, we may determine transportation, Gwen, excellent, you know, example. We came in here 1 year and transportation looked pretty good. And we came back a year later and the director turned over. We're reading in the paper that there's issues with bus routes. We can't get bus drivers. The payroll has become quite complex with the union agreement. So that might show up on the top 10. And we may decide that, hey, we're going to take a look at that this year because of those risks. So just because we do an audit in year 1 and implementation of action plan happens in year 2, that doesn't mean in year 3 that it won't show up on the audit plan again for any number of reasons, right? Change, high risk. I mean, look, we just had a pandemic. What a crazy time that's been, and it's spun all different kinds of things and all different kinds of risks. So I hope that answers your question, but coming up with the issue is just the beginning. Really collaborating with the folks who deal with this process day in and day out, and the IT folks who know the system and quite frankly know the limits of the system. Do we have to put a manual control in place? Do we have to put a detective control in place instead of a preventative control? So that happens through conversation and collaboration with the folks at the district to see what can we do. And in some cases, it may be determined and approved and accepted by the board that we're just going to live with this risk. That doesn't always happen. It very rarely happens, but in some cases, you know, a new IT system is on the horizon, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. And also we deal with budget constraints as well.
And this is all in line with kind of just Institute of Internal Audit. This is standard IIA type of stuff. So, and how I see it handled also at your corporate audit committee type of levels as well. So this appears in line with like expectations.
Okay, good. And yeah, it answered my question. I just wanted to make sure we've got a good roadmap for making sure everybody's time that's very valuable, that we're making sure that effectual changes occur. So thank you. That answered it. And I appreciate the extra add in there. So thank you.
And as a follow-up to what Mr. Swank just brought out, what I would also hope is that if a member of management says that can be kicked down the road a little bit because I just don't have the time in the day, I would absolutely hope that RSM will stand their ground and say, no, this is a high enough risk. I know you don't have the hours in the day, but somebody better find the hours in the day to put a mitigating control in place.
But Paul, and I would say that's kind of where we also have to come in and the board has to come in, right? So as part of audit reports, generally they will include what's the risk and what's the overall risk threshold, whether it's high, moderate, low. You know, usually for high risk type of items, you expect to see some form of remediation plan unless there's unless they're mitigating through alternative mechanisms, right? Sometimes you don't remediate, sometimes you just mitigate, sometimes you just reduce the risk threshold through alternative procedures. So that's where, you know, RSM and just following IA methodology should give us the guidance in terms of what's the risk, what's the impact, and then we can make a determination if management's coming back, if the IT team or any of the audit stakeholders are coming back saying, yeah, this isn't going to work for us, you know, that's where, you know, we could challenge.
Absolutely. But I think
So,
from a board
for example, right now, the whole world is dealing with cyber risk, right? Mitigating that is very challenging. Overburdening, we call it over audit syndrome, right? Like constantly be in with your IT folks doing pen testing. How often should we do it? You know, it's a risk. We all know it's a risk, and how far we go to mitigate that risk is a real balancing act. You know, do we do penetration testing, you know, once a year? Is that enough? So that's constant conversation that, you know, that we have part of the education process with the board so that they understand where those risks are. But the other is resources. So that's something that we all deal with every day, whether it's at home or at work or as an internal auditor or, you know, maintenance, et cetera. So understanding and balancing those risks is something that, to your point, we look to this committee to assist and ultimately the board to take on ownership of that risk. Our job is awareness of that risk.
Okay. And then circling back, because this is a publicly noticed meeting and is being recorded, if I can, from our board attorney, to put on public record, what process do you recommend that we implement as relates to a cybersecurity or information technology or any other audit that would have confidential ramifications to it, so that members of the public will not get up in arms and say, we heard them say that they're going to have this discussion, but they don't want us privy to anything going on. What are they hiding?
But that was directed at me, Paul?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so public records has a list of its exemptions, what is considered exempt and what is considered confidential. So when there is a public records request that may request a document that is confidential or exempt, they will be able to tell. A lot of times if there's a legal question, they will contact legal services for direction, but they have their process where they can pull out those things and they will respond to the requester if it falls within that exemption that this document is exempt pursuant to Florida statute 119 point, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a process for that.
I appreciate that. And again, I just want to make absolutely sure that any member of the public that may be listening to this meeting has full clarity as to why they may not be made privy to certain information that was shared amongst audit committee and board members. Okay, Matt, I'm going to put it back into your capable hands.
Is Matt frozen?
I was gonna say.
Yes, he is.
I was like, he has a great poker
There he
face.
is.
Did I cut out for a second?
You
Yes,
did.
you did.
Yes,
Oh,
it's great.
well, I'm back now. So what I was saying was, I think we've pretty much covered everything through kind of what we intend to do through reporting. We're eager to get started, and we'll reach out to schedule our kickoffs for these meetings and schedule some individual meetings with you all for the risk assessment process within the next week and a half.
I have one question, if I may.
Yes, please.
So my question is with regards to, I know that part of the scope of work was to review past audits and see where we are and what recommendations. When will that take place?
Concurrently with the risk assessment. So we're gonna reach out within the next week and a half to schedule kickoff meetings for all of those projects. And when I say all of those projects, I'm referring to the information technology cybersecurity assessment, the risk assessment and proposed internal audit plan, and the follow-up testing.
Thank you.
Okay, for their benefit, if we can, and Kara, I apologize for cutting you off. Does anybody have any conflicts over the next week to 2 weeks with spring break or any other travel plans where you may not be available to spend a little bit of time with representatives of RSM?
I'll be traveling for work next week in California, but again, I'll make time if it's a short enough meeting to step out. This is important enough, so I'll coordinate with the audit team as need be.
Thank you. Kara, now that I cut you up, please.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say, well, just in regards to the question that you just had about our availability, I'll be traveling next week and on and off for the next couple of weeks, but I can also make myself available just depending on, what day it is. So we could work on that. But I also wanted to ask for the risk assessment. I don't know if I understood this correctly. Did you say that, Martha, did you say that the risk assessment is done annually? Is that correct? You reassess every year?
Yes, there's usually a full-blown risk assessment every 3 years, which goes a little bit deeper. This is a update of the risk assessment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And I was hoping I would not be available next week because I wanted to join them in Paris, but I'll be here.
Well, we'll be reaching out to schedule the meetings next week. I know Clara will want to meet with all of you, and she'll be in Paris next week. I'm not going to do that to her. So we'll probably be looking at after the meeting scheduled that last week of March.
I think this was very productive. A quick recap, I think what we've agreed to is that the second Friday of each month, we can expect an update on all projects. Reports will be generated through the staff liaison to audit committee members as well as board members. There will be some confidentiality, and our board attorney has gone into detail as relates to how confidentiality will be handled on a going forward basis. The one thing I don't think we discussed was the hotline. So if anybody, how do we wish to handle those members of the public that want you to investigate somebody because for right or wrong reasons? I'm going to leave it at that.
And Paul, before you move on to that, I believe we added that the staff liaison would give copies to the board, the committee, the board, the superintendent, and the attorney.
You're absolutely correct, Ms. Gittens.
Okay.
And either Jennifer or Matt, how would you wish to handle the process of those phone calls coming in with requests to investigate certain individuals, departments, et cetera?
Excuse me, Paul, just for clarification, are we talking about whistleblower lighthouse complaints, or are we
Yes,
talking
we are.
about
Yes,
just
we
call?
are. No, you're talking
Okay,
about
so
whistleblower.
so we actually have a new process that that we are utilizing at this time. So right now, when we have whistleblower complaints or lighthouse hotline complaints, they are actually sent to the Office of Legal Services, and we're using the case management system from Lighthouse to monitor all of those complaints. The board attorneys get together and they review everything and decide if there's legal sufficiency. And if there is, they move it forward to the appropriate department, which could include the board auditor, it can include the internal auditor, it can include professional standards, it can include just going to the principal. It just really depends on what the allegation is and what the complaint is. And that's what we have been doing for the last, I would say about a month or so. It's been a progression since we did not have a board auditor. We had to figure out a process, and over a month's time, that is the process that we have at this time. So it's not going to the board auditor at all. It's going to Office of Legal Services, and they will forward to the appropriate department.
Okay, but how will it play out if it does go to the board auditor? I just want to make sure anything that
I think that was a question before, which is why I think Kathy was saying that we came up with this process. The problem was that RSM would only receive it as the auditor if it was waste, fraud, or abuse. And that determination was the sticking point. The way this process goes, the legal team sees it first and is able to determine that from a legal perspective, and then it is given out from there, because that was one of the catching points before. I'm sure RSM remembers all of that, that they only handle it if it is waste, fraud, or abuse. So there, now with this process, I personally, and I think the board agrees, is a lot smoother because there's that determination. It doesn't have to go here and there and everywhere. Is it legal? Is it waste, fraud, or abuse? It goes here. If it's this, it goes there. Am I saying that correctly, Kathy?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly how it goes. So if we have something that is waste, fraud, and abuse, we'll contact the board auditor and advise them that this complaint came in, and then from there they can process. Or if it's something else that goes someplace else, that's how we've been doing it.
Right, I'm trying to get more clarity as to waste, fraud, and abuse. Our board auditor, which is RSM, gets called in. They do their investigative work. They come to a conclusion that yes, there is waste, fraud, or abuse occurring. How is the audit committee made privy to that information? Because that is a special audit. Requested through legal. I appreciate that at the board's discretion, but the audit committee should be made aware, because that could obviously have impact on the audit plan going forward, or whether or not the audit committee deems an audit of a certain process may be needed sooner rather than later.
So that I think is a discussion with the board auditor and the audit committee. I believe that if there is a whistleblower complaint that's waste, fraud, and abuse, it goes to the board auditor, and any reports or findings should go to the audit committee for discussion and recommendation. That's how I think that a lot of districts do it, but I will leave that to the audit committee and the board auditor to decide how to do it from that point.
And I will leave it to RSM as to how you do it with other school districts.
I believe the process that Kathy described is what we've seen with other districts where, the reporting process would follow a somewhat similar reporting process to the normal reports that we would issue, where we would be presenting things that could be considered non-confidential, in public forum. And of course, if there were certain items that would have required something to be discussed out of sunshine, we would take the normal approach like we would for like an IT report, as an example. But that would be, if we were to be engaged to work on a fraud, waste, or abuse issue, and we were working through that, I mean, of course, we would be in communication with the audit committee to discuss, what was going on and what the plan was to go forward.
And that's what I was hoping to hear. As I said, the reason for this call and meeting we're having today is so that all parties within the audit process are all on the same page. And I just want to ensure that the audit committee members, the board, and RSM, as well as staff, are all on the same page as to how all audit processes will be handled on a going forward basis.
And Mr. Cohen, I just have one thing I would like to add to that is sometimes if there is an investigation of waste, fraud, and abuse that involves an employee, then those investigations are confidential until the investigation is concluded. And I believe 10 days after that, the report can be available to the public. So I just want to put that out there as well.
Absolutely. And that's part of what I appreciate being brought out in this discussion right now. So I'm very glad that you made that information available to the members of the audit committee so they are fully aware as to how that process will be handled on a going forward basis. Okay, I'm going to ask you if any members of RSM have anything else that they would like to add into this discussion, or do we feel that we are, I'll call it lockstep right now with audit committee, board, staff, and RSM at this point?
No, on RSM's behalf, we're certainly excited to be getting started and appreciate the committee's time this evening.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, Matt and Jennifer.
Thank you, everyone else, and especially the committee. You guys are very hardworking, and we really appreciate it.
Okay. With that being said, is there anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, can I get a second, please?
I will second.
Okay. All in favor of adjourning the meeting at 5:50 p.m.? Say aye.
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 Okay, thank you all for your time and your hard work. And looking forward, and we will set up our meeting for next month. We'll send out through Dawn the availability schedule. I would much rather RSM start their process so that we don't identify a date right now, draw a date, and RSM is struggling to meet that date. So Matt, if you could check with your team also to see their availability in the month of April, we'll coordinate our next meeting accordingly.
Absolutely.
And I promise not to forget anybody next time.
Hey, thank you all for your time and have a great evening.
You too.
Take
Have a
care,
good
everybody.
night.